Hello and welcome to the big picture. As the focus of the governments have increasingly moved towards social sector programs, huge funds are being set aside for them. In India, in the last 10 years, some very significant programs have been launched and have been implemented, involving millions of beneficiaries and thousands of crores of rupees. The question is, how successful are these programs and how well do they reach the target audience? To assess the success or otherwise, impact evaluation of these programs are now being embraced increasingly in many parts of the world, including India. As a conference held here in the capital looked at the international and South Asian experiences in impact evaluations. Today we will look at how impact evaluations of social sector programs are making a difference or can make a difference to them and its beneficiaries. What are the roadblocks which are encountered by the professionals involved in it? And most importantly, how governments respond to these evaluations, not just in India, but also in other parts of the world. To discuss this, I have with me Dr. Ajay Chhibber, Director General, Independent Evaluation Office, Government of India, Dr. Thoriq Luthfi, Minister of Health from the Maldives, Dr. Howard White, Executive Director, International Initiative for Impact Evaluation, and Biraj Patnaik, Principal Advisor to Right to Food in the Office of Commissioners to the Supreme Court. Welcome to all of you. Let me go to Dr. Ajay Chhibber first. Dr. Chhibber, this is a new office which has been started. You are the first Director General of this. The Government of India seems to have understood the impact, the importance of the impact evaluation. How far, what all have you been able to achieve so far, and what all are you looking forward to achieve?
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for having me. The office has just started. I only started in August this year.
Right.
I think it's very good because I think India is catching up with the rest of the world. Many emerging economies have already established such offices and a culture of impact evaluation much before us. Mexico, for example, has done a number of impact evaluations on many of its major programs. So has Brazil. South Africa also has set up an independent evaluation office. So I think for us in India, this is a first, but it's better late than never.
Absolutely.
So it's a good start.
Better late than never is what is right. But Dr. Chhibber, what are the programs which your office is planning to take up? You know, we have a lot of these very important social sector programs in the last 10 years. As I said in my introduction, thousands of crores have already been put into these programs. Which are these programs? Have you prioritized what you are going to take up?
Well, so what I've done is I'm starting a conversation with the public at large on what we should take up. But to get things started, we have already decided to move ahead on 3 major evaluations. One is an evaluation of the food distribution system, the PDS.
Right.
As you know that there is now this food security bill.
Right.
So it's very important first for us to know what the current system, PDS system, is doing, how much of that actually benefits people, what are the costs, what are the inefficiencies, what is the leakage of the system. So that's one major evaluation that we are embarking on. The other 2 that I'm already thinking about is, one is on the Millennium Development Goals. One of the areas in which India does not do very well is on maternal mortality. So we are going to start an evaluation of looking at why the maternal mortality rate remains so high, why it's so variable across the country, what are the contributors to it, what happens with skilled birth attendants and things like that.
Okay.
And then the third one we are thinking of is on rural electrification.
Okay.
And yesterday when I was at the 3IE conference,
right.
Howard White and I have worked very closely together in the past. I'm a great admirer of his work. So he and I have been talking also perhaps of starting one other evaluation, particularly looking at the Manrega program.
Okay.
So those are the ones.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Dr. Harvard White, what has been your experiences and what do you think can change in India with these impact evaluations? Just now, Dr. Chhibber told us what they are prioritizing and what they want to do. But, if these things, when these things are taken up, what kind of a difference is it going to make?
So as Ajay Chhibber mentioned, these types of evaluations have been conducted in a number of other countries, other than India, over the last 15 years or so now. And one of the leading countries in this field is Mexico.
Right.
And two notable things that were done in Mexico. So one was that in the mid-1990s, they started a program of conditional cash transfers. These are amounts of cash given to families conditional on certain behaviours.
Right.
In this case, the children from the household attending school and having a satisfactory school performance.
Right.
And then they get the money.
You're talking of Mexico.
So I'm talking Mexico, yes.
Right.
This was done there in the mid-1990s. And this program is evaluated using a rigorous impact evaluation and found to be successful. And what happened as a result was that when the government changed, the program managed to survive. Mexico, like often happens in India, when new governments come in, all the old programs are swept away and new programs come in with no thought about, well, were the old programs working or not? So what's happened in Mexico is that the progressive program managed to survive now 3 changes in government, including changes in political parties. So there's been evidence used to allow programs to survive political transition and programs to improve their effectiveness through looking at the evidence of how they are working and so improve the design of those programs.
So you think these kind of evaluations will help sustain programs?
They will sustain programs that are working
And what about
close down
improvement?
programs that are not working.
Okay, at least people will get to know what they're working.
Yes.
Mr. Luthfi, you are a minister in the Maldivian government, right? The
Correct,
Minister of
yes.
Health.
Minister of State for Health.
Minister of State for Health. And what kind of health programs and, why is this important in your country? Yours is a very small country, I expect, compared to India. But, how has it benefited you? Have you already undertaken this impact evaluation or are they doing it? Or
No,
what is the
we
stage?
actually we're planning to have impact evaluation done on our social health insurance program.
Right.
Now, incidentally, I think Maldives and India share some common aspects of this together because your first social health insurance program, if I'm correct, was launched somewhere in 2007.
Right.
We got into this in 2008. But of course, in the last few years, India has invested heavily in systems, whereas we have not. And though we share some of the common problems and challenges in the systems. So in Maldives, from 2008 till now, what has happened is that from about 16 million Maldivian rupees per year, we have the program cost has escalated to something like 740 million by 2012.
740 million in your currency or?
In our currency, in Maldivian rupees. So the conversion is about 15.45 to $1.
Okay.
And so this is a huge escalation. Of course, we have universalized the program. All Maldivians, including those who are living abroad, especially in Sri Lanka and India, are able to avail the benefits of this program.
Okay.
Now, the question for us then is, having had so much of funds invested, is it producing the results that it was intended? And this is the reason why that we talked to 3IE and decided to have a look at the program.
And what has been the results? What have you found?
We're just embarking on it.
Oh, you're just embarking on
Yes,
it.
yes.
You're not yet come to it. Well, okay. Yeah. Let me come to Biraj. Biraj, Dr. Chhibber says that they're going to take up this new setup which has been, which the government of India has decided to have. But he's talking about especially the food security thing. They want to look at the PDAs and things like that. Is there any scope for more information which is needed, which the independent evaluation office is going to take up? Because we have had a lot of study on PDS systems in this country.
Yeah, no, I think, firstly, Girish, I think it's absolutely right. I think it is nobody's case that we should not evaluate our programs. And it is indeed correct that one of the biggest weaknesses of our programming is that we don't build any kind of evaluation into the design of the program while it is being designed. Ideally, when you
Exactly.
design a program, you should build that into the design. Second, we've never budgeted for it. We've never had the finance ministry come up and say that X percentage of the budget of that program, say 3% or 5%, probably lesser for very large programs, should mandatorily be put aside for impact assessment.
Right.
We've moved to a outcomes-based budgeting, but we are not measuring those outcomes. So
Right.
there is a need for doing that. But I want to make two more points here. I think one challenge is that in India traditionally, we don't have a tradition of evidence-based policy making.
Right.
We have a tradition of policy-based evidence making.
Absolutely.
We first make the policy, then we look at the evidence.
Right.
Second, although we have one of the widest statistical infrastructure that any country can have, we don't collect data on key indicators.
Right.
Now, if I was looking at malnutrition, there's no data available since 2006. The last assessment, the IEO is a new body, the Impact Evaluation Office is a new, Independent Evaluation Office is a new body, but you had the PEO, which is the Planning Commission's Program Evaluation Office, which has been in existence forever. But the last study on the PDS that the PEO did, which was comprehensive, the most cited one, with all its flaws, was done in 2005.
Right.
And the data for that was collected in 2004. Now, my question, I think the reason why you don't have it is because we do not accord the necessary importance to the social sector. We collect economic data and we release it on a monthly or a quarterly basis. Stock market data is analyzed by television anchors on a weekly basis if there's a thing, sometimes on an hourly basis. But and now here is a government where the Prime Minister says that malnutrition is the biggest curse.
Yes.
But we don't have data since 2006, since the last NFHS 3.
Dr. Chhibber, this is very interesting what Biraj is saying. You are now going to be faced with a huge challenge. There are any number of statistical organizations in this country, but as Biraj says that we don't have enough evidence on hand. You are going to be. Don't you think that you may have a problem? Conflict of interest or turf wars with, say, the Planning Commission or the central statistical organizations and other such planning bodies and things like that. How do you plan to ensure that you don't step on minefields?
Well, first let me say that part of the reason for establishing this independent evaluation office is because the feeling is that the existing evaluation system was not working.
Yes.
And having read all the evaluation reports that have been produced by the PEO and others, quite frankly, to some extent it is correct, because very little of that is really real impact evaluation of the kind that Howard White or somebody like him would be aspiring to do. So I think number one, we have to have a change in the approach that in the terms of reference under which these evaluations are being done. Of the many positions that I have held in the past, I have also been the head of the World Bank's evaluation office for 4 years, and Howard and I worked together there. So I think it's a whole different set of questions of the results chain that one asks in impact evaluation, which is very important, I think, the direction in which we will try to take it. Now, you're absolutely right, and so is the advisor, Mr. Biraj, on the issue of data, that it is very important that we have access to the right data and that it is being systematically collected. As it happens, somebody I know very well is Mr. TCA Anand, who is the head of the statistics office, and he was actually for a brief period, he was my student at the University of Delhi. So I'm thinking that he and I should work together in how we can not just do sporadic surveys on particular topics, but actually build a systematic and more comprehensive way in which we collect the relevant data related to key outcomes that we would try to track in the work that we do. But it's not enough to do outcome.
No, Dr. Chhibber, my question is this. At the end of the day, all these evaluations and whatever outcomes come out of your work has to be utilized by the political leadership. The political executive has to be sensitive to these things. As Biraj was pointing out, and as we have seen in this country for years, programs are announced on the spur of the moment by politicians during election campaigns or in other kinds of places without having any thought to the kind of budget which are necessary and all these things. How hopeful are you that the political executive is going to become sensitive to these kind of things, and maybe before announcing any programs have these kind of evaluations? You expect that change to happen anytime soon in this country?
Well, I mean, we don't, that would be the ideal situation, of course, but, we have to start from where we are. And from where we are, we already have all these programs. We have so many programs.
Right.
In fact, we have something like 50 or 60 or 70 national flagship programs. So, and we are spending, as you rightly said, thousands of crores of rupees on them. So right now our interest is, let's assess what we have to see, as Howard White said, what is working, those should be preserved. What is not working, those should be closed down. And even those that are working, how can they be improved even better? So that's where we are focused.
Okay.
Of course, the ideal world would be that if fresh programs are being started, we have some pilots where we assess initially what is going to work and then build those programs around those successful pilots. I mean,
Right.
that's the scaling up thing that would be the ideal way to go. But here, as was rightly said, we've already scaled up. We've announced these programs. Now the question is, how do we rationalize them? How do we make them more effective? And that's what we will be practically working in our efforts towards.
Okay, Dr. Chhibber, I think you need to go. You wanted to go. If
Thank
you
you
can,
so much.
If you
I
can
appreciate,
If you can stay back for another 5 minutes, then I will appreciate that. But please, you can think about it. Dr. Howard White, this is an important thing. Ultimately, it is the political executive which matters in all these things. What has been your experience in other countries with the political executive? Have they been sensitive to these kind of evaluations? Have you had experiences where midway the program, the way it is implemented has been changed? Have you had such experiences, and what have been your positive as well as negative experiences?
Yes, we do, and increasingly so. Particularly in a country like India, where civil society and the media play an important role, there are various ways in which you can seek to influence policy with evidence. So it's not just a matter of making evidence available directly to policymakers, it's making evidence about the effectiveness of programs made known more widely. So in the conference we had yesterday, it was mentioned by someone from the UK presenting the British experience, who said very clearly, a politician would have a very hard time in defending a program that's been shown publicly not to work. Yes. If that's widely known, then they can't do that. So making this evidence available and an accessible, the Freedom of Information Act and so on, that supports making evidence available to the broader public is an important part of helping to inform policy making. I agree with what was said earlier, that in many countries, not just in India, we have evidence-based policy rather than policy-based, wrong way around, rather than policy-based, rather than policy being based on evidence, evidence is based on policy. And we don't think for a moment we're going to change it overnight to a situation in which all politicians are looking at evidence to inform their policy. But we'd expect to see gradual change, and we have examples around the world, including here in India. So if I might give one example, there's a study that we supported in Gujarat, which was looking at the way in which industrial effluent is measured at the level of individual plants. And what had been done traditionally was that the plants themselves contracted auditors to measure their own effluent output. And what the study showed was that the readings that were being collected were actually incorrect and tended to be clustered just below the threshold at which the plant would actually have to take action. Once independent auditors were appointed, you started to get a broader range of readings showing that some plants were emitting above the allowed level And but actually plants then responded to that information and having fines imposed by reducing their effluents. And that policy has now been adopted in Gujarat. They're looking at a similar design schemes for other types of area in pollution control. Other states are also looking at adopting a scheme like that.
What about nations? What about Western nations? You must have worked with Western nations also. You have been in the World Bank also. Dr. Chhibber was pointing out. How do the Western nations, you think Western nations have adopted this already, and are there evidence-based policy making in place there? Or is it a problem there also?
It is a problem there, and it happens to a varying degree. But for example, again, in the United Kingdom, a centre for evidence has been set up at cabinet level to collect evidence around particular programmes to help inform social spending in the UK.
Okay. Mr. Luthfi, you are a politician yourself, unlike Mr. White or Biraj Patnaik or even Dr. Chhibber. You have to face the music and you have to take decisions. Your own colleagues, your government, how does it respond to these kind of things? How difficult would it be for governments to change their policies midway, change the way they implement the policies midway?
It's not going to be easy. And I guess we are no different from any other country. After all, we are driven by our need to be popular.
And popular schemes are important.
Yes, they're very important. They're part of our life. That's the reason why some of us get elected in office and probably
continuing also.
Yes, so we are no exception on that. Even for the program that in question, when I took over the program in February 2012, after the change in administration in Maldives, we were in fact facing an expenditure of something like 1.2 billion rupees in Maldives, which is huge, which is even going over the budget
for this
particular
program
scheme. And with all the political turmoil in Maldives at that point of time, it was extremely difficult for us to make changes. But the fact is, we made changes. We contained that program into about 740 million a year.
But you brought it down by nearly 400 million.
Yes, but it was not easy, and people were critical, about some of the changes we brought. But then I think
huge vested interests are involved in these kind of programs everywhere.
The way these programs are structured, sometimes, especially the model that we use in the Maldives is fee for service, and obviously there's a lot of moral hazards in that. And after all, you're dealing with one of the most educated communities in the world, and therefore, generally they find ways of making use of the system for their benefit. Certainly it happens everywhere. So. We had our problems. It's not easy, but I think a lot of this is driven by necessity. I think even politicians are not kind of insulated from these issues. If it's necessary, I suppose they will do it. Because by supporting...
The role of the media also will become very important, as White was pointing out,
Yes.
How, if you bring out evidence and if it's shown that actually money is being wasted.
That's the point I was trying to make, because media changes the populist mood here, and that in turn affects the people who thrive on it.
So how long, when do you expect this evaluation which you have undertaken to be complete, and when will you have a report?
Actually, we just started this trip. We have signed the MOU, so I hope in the next couple of months we should start on that. I don't have an exact date when we will finish, but certainly that study will be interesting.
It is. Biraj, the question is, what are the, you spoke earlier about evidence and not having evidence and things like that Chhibber also was pointing out. Now finally, do you think that India, the Indian reality, what happens in different states. We have still not been able to come to some kind of a conclusion across the country what kind of a PDS we need to have. So you think these kind of evaluations will ultimately help in policy making? Do you have such hopes?
Yeah, I think so. I think that if you had the right kind of studies done, which obviously it requires a change in political
Tell me
culture.
why such studies have not been done
No,
so far.
no. In fact, the studies have been, because you see, there are. I mean, evaluation. Doing an
For
evaluation.
example, for
Yeah.
example, the right to vote. You were part of this campaign for the last several years. You people must have done, you and
absolutely.
others people who have been involved in this campaign must have had some evidence, must have gathered some evidence, gathered some data.
Absolutely. But you see, the problem is that often our program design is contingent on finances, and it is contingent on, what is perceived to deliver better benefit. And therefore, for instance, if you look at the evidence, all the states which have expanded their PDS, the evidence is in favor of universalizing the public distribution system. All the evidence points to that. The states which are doing better are states which have universalized. Now,
But still
unfortunately, there is no fiscal space to do
and
that.
also there is a huge controversy going on whether it has to be targeted or universalized.
Exactly.
We have not still
Absolutely. And I think there, having clear-cut data, having data which tells you, because a lot of data that's generated now is from the system. Now, of course, you have NSSO data, you can analyze unit level data, but you don't have an independent evaluation which all stakeholders can agree on. Now, if I commissioned a private agency and I'm a state government to do a survey which shows that my PDS is doing well, you will have other states or the central government saying that, look, we don't trust this data. So that I think is part of the problem. The second challenge I think is, one word of caution, evaluation is being sought to be made synonymous with randomized controlled trials. That, it's almost like if you don't have an RCT, you haven't done your evaluation right. I think that caution needs to be applied here, because I don't think there is a lot of controversies surrounding that, and the acceptance of the views that RCTs are the only way forward. There are ways and ways of doing evaluations. We have to look at
would you like to respond to this?
how to do that best that works for us.
Absolutely. Randomized controlled trials are often a very powerful way of establishing causality with a program caused the observed change in outcomes. But they are not the only way of doing it. They're not always a possible way of doing it. When you can do it, you probably should. But even when you are doing a randomized controlled trial, you should embed that design in a broader evaluation framework that looks at the overall causal chain underlying the program, so you can pick up aspects of why programs are working or not working. So if you want to design programs to work better, it's crucial that you're not just using randomized controlled trial design, but you're also actually looking at the process aspects of how well they were delivered. Were things done as they're meant to be done? If there's training involved, there often is, or the community workers, are they aware of their responsibilities? They understand the knowledge they're meant to transfer to the community and so on. You have to dig down inside the program to look at those aspects.
Okay.
If I may, can I just add?
Please.
I would like to say also, it was mentioned also by Ajay, where you're starting with smaller scale programs, then it's important to pilot those and try those out on a small scale basis before you take them to a larger scale. And perhaps, actually, if I may, I'd like to ask the Minister to share a couple of ideas he picked up yesterday at the conference from the Public Health Institute here in Delhi that he's going to now take to Maldives.
Sorry, we completely run out of time. But this has been an interesting discussion. Some new hopes have come after this evaluation, but we'll have to see how it will work, what kind of a impact evaluation will have on the political class, on the ruling class, on the political executive as well as the bureaucracy, and how they will be able to adopt to these new evidence or data which is going to come out. We will wait and watch, but anyway, thanks to all my guests, Dr. Ajay Chhibber, who had joined us earlier, Howard White, Thoriq Ali Luthfi, and Biraj Patnaik. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue, The Big Picture, same time on Monday. Meanwhile, have a great weekend.